Hello everyone and welcome to this course with Group 3. This series is all about how to use the Softube Model 82 synthesizer. The Model 82 is a monophonic, meaning one voice synthesizer that's based on a Roland SH-101 from 1982. This is a really great synthesizer for creating all sorts of monophonic sounds, so lead synthesizers, arpeggio plucks, or bass lines. One of the things that makes this really unique and sets it apart from the other software emulations of these vintage synths that Softube makes is going to be this step sequencer and arpeggio system that's built into this synth. This is a really great way to come up with some really cool patterns, and it has a really simple workflow that we'll show in some of the later videos that could be really great for coming up with some really cool musical sequences. One of my favorite things about this software emulation that I've talked about with the other Softube synthesizers is going to be the fact that these don't have a ton of built-in effects. You get a very dry analog sound, and you can process it however you need for a given production. I find that this actually makes it a lot faster to work with these synthesizers, because you can queue up a preset and then process it how you need to for a given song, and that actually just makes the workflow tons better. That's why I'm a big fan of all the different Softube analog synthesizers. This course will also be for people who already know a little bit of how synthesizers work and basic synthesizer terminology, so if you're completely new to synthesis, you might want to check out some of the other beginner courses on Group 3's website, and then come back after learning the basics of how to use synths. Now let's go ahead and talk briefly about some of the different configurable options that are available on the synth. And then in the following videos, we'll dive into each of these different parts, showing you how they work and the types of sounds that they can create. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is the Resizing Interface. This is something that you could do on all of the different Softube model synthesizers. And basically what this enables me to do is just click on this and drag upwards to get a larger interface. Or if I want to consolidate this down because I'm on a really big high resolution screen and I'm mixing a track and I've got maybe, a couple of different effects devices, and I'm adjusting things, I could do so as well. But we're going to go ahead and put this quite a bit bigger, so that way it is a little bit easier to see everything for these videos. Then the other thing that we have is going to be this top menu bar with a couple of different configurable options. The first of which is going to be this undo and redo control. So let's say I made an adjustment, maybe I adjusted some oscillators or changed a filter. I could then go through and undo those. So let's say I was making changes and then adjusted this filter and decided I wanted to go ahead and undo it. I could hit this undo button, is going to undo that filter. I could then redo it, or again, undo it again. So it just gives me a little bit more options to undo different parts of my synth. This is helpful because sometimes, depending on the DAW you're using, the edit functions will actually undo the creation of the synthesizer or will undo the last thing you did inside of this main sequencer window, depending on how it's all configured. So sometimes I find it's a little bit more helpful to use these because sometimes you actually undo the creation of a synth or undo a volume change that you had over here or something like that. So I find it's a little bit easier to use these to keep everything nice and organized. The other thing that we have is going to be this MIDI CC configuration panel. So if I click on this, what this will enable me to do is map various different parameters on the synth to an external MIDI controller. So for example, if I'm using this in a live situation and I wanted this filter to be mapped to a slider that I was going to manipulate as I played a sequence, I could do this. Or if you're deciding to automate things via MIDI CC data, you could do so as well inside of like a MIDI clip in Ableton. So all you have to do to configure this is go ahead and click on this section right here, and then click on whatever parameter you'd like to go ahead and map to MIDI CC, and then move that slider, and it's going to go ahead and map it. For us, I'm just going to go ahead and exit that, but that is how you would configure that. Down here, you can see things that are currently mapped to various different MIDI CCs. So we have the bender, which is going to be the pitch bend down here, or we also have the trigger, which is going to be this button. You can see that that's mapped to MIDI CC number 1, and this is mapped to the pitch bend wheel. If you want to go ahead and save a custom mapping or load a custom mapping, you could do so via these two different commands. And that could be, again, helpful if you're working in a live situation, you make a custom mapping for this whole thing, and you want to load that up, you can go ahead and do that with this button. Then we have the settings panel. This kind of remains consistent across the various different Softube synthesizers, the first of which being the use tooltips in all Softube plugins. So right now I have this disabled up here at the top. So that way we don't have a bunch of pop-ups telling us more information about these different things. So that way it's just a little bit cleaner as we're working through these tutorials. But as you're beginning to use these synthesizers for the first time, recommend turning this on just to get a little bit more information, kind of may help you as you're working through them. But we'll cover everything in detail in this course. Then we also have the opening style. So this is just how the tooltips pop up. So right now it's configured to click, but you have a couple of different options depending on how you would like to set that all up. Then we could either reset this to our factory size on the window, or we could save it. So I'm going to go ahead, make this larger one my default. I'm going to hit save as default. You can see now it says done. And then whenever I open this up, it's going to be this larger screen size, which will be more helpful for these tutorials. Then we have these advanced settings down here. Usually I like to leave these at their default state. This is set to the Use Metal API graphics. for all the different Softube plugins. This will depend on your hardware and software configuration. So for example, on my Mac, I have the ability to use this graphics processor. But again, depending on what you're using, you may see this option or may look slightly different. If you're finding that you're having some problems with the graphical interface or big CPU spikes or something like that, I'd recommend turning this off and trying to restart your DAW and see if it helps optimize your performance. But usually with more modern laptops or desktop computers, this usually works fine. Then the other helpful one is going to be the show value display. I have that enabled. That way, whenever I click on something and we look in this top menu bar right here, we have the option to see the value. And by the way, if you want to reset something, you can hit Option and click, and it will reset to its default state. And that's going to be Alt on Windows. The last button on this top section over here is going to be the About panel. This will give you a little bit of information about the synthesizer, access to the manual, and also access to your license key. I'm not going to click on that, so that way my license key doesn't pop up for everyone. But if you're curious about some more information or want to access the manual quickly, you could do so via that button. Then we have our preset browser. So if I click on this, we're going to get a couple of different options. First of which is going to be these presets up here. This accesses my user presets. You can see there's one that's going to be custom that we'll talk about a little bit later. I have all my factory presets, and all I have to do is click through them, and it's going to go ahead and load them. And then I can use these arrows to move through those presets. You can also see on this preset, the color has changed to red. That's one of the configurable options we'll talk about a little bit later. You can see now it's swapping through those different options, especially with bass lines on this synth. Really, really nice for bass line. So you can use those arrows to go ahead and move through those different options. And then you have a couple of different options as well. So we can either add a preset. So if you want to load in a custom preset from a sample pack or one of the presets we include with this course, you can go ahead and click on that to load those in. Then you have the option to save as. So if you'd like to save the preset that you're working on and export it and share it with someone, or you're making like a preset sample pack or something like that, you can go ahead and do so with this. You also have the option to revert any changes you've made. This is actually super helpful. So let's say I made kind of a custom version of this bass, and I didn't like the changes I made. I can go ahead and hit revert changes. And it's going to put it back to kind of this default preset here, which is kind of nice, especially if you're trying to work on something, you want to go back to the original preset, you could shift out there. Then we have set current preset as default. That'll go ahead and set up the synthesizer so that whenever you load it up, it'll have this preset, whatever preset you have selected as the default. For us, I'll go ahead and just leave it as regular defaults, but that'll be kind of helpful depending on what you need. And then we also have reset all values to default, which will give us kind of this default preset that loads up whenever you first start the synth, or whatever preset you set as your default. You also have the option to clear the search or clear filters, and that's mainly for this other preset view, which we can go ahead and click on this to view to see kind of our main options. So this is the main preset browser window that you'll be using the most inside the synthesizer. You can use this to go ahead and quickly search for keywords. So maybe I want like a bass. This is going to give me all of the bass presets. Then all I have to do is click on one, and it's going to go ahead and load that up. The nice part about this as well is there's also a couple different options to sort of refine this down further. So this is all the basses. I could maybe do something like a fat bass. Give me a couple different options. Let's maybe try this one right here. Gives me like a really thick analog bass. Click on that again. And if we'd like to go back in this menu, I can click on those to remove them, or click on this X to remove that keyword. The other options we have are going to be some of the things from that other menu, add presets, save, or save as. It's just a different way of kind of interfacing with those same controls. And then we have the option to hide the tags if we don't want to use them, or hide the info panel. Then we have this tile view, which is another way of viewing presets. I usually like this one. It's a little quicker for me to navigate, but that is an option. And then we have this drop down. It gives me a couple more advanced controls. Again, that add preset, save as, you can hide the tags, some of these different options here that are these buttons. And you could also grab the manual from here, which I think is probably the most helpful one. You can go ahead and grab that manual if you need to. All you have to do from there is scroll around, select a different preset. Let's maybe try Heavy Rain. Sounds kind of like an interesting patch here. I'll click on that. And then we see this other icon that lets me know that this is the factory preset. We have a rating system where we can configure a different 5-star rating. We can organize things via color, or we can look at the description to get a little bit more information about our sound. You also see that we have this kind of green icon here that we can change if we want to. Preset name, we can give it a 5-star rating or give it like a 2-star rating. I find this is actually really helpful for kind of navigating presets quickly. you go through the whole preset bank, because there's not too many presets, so if you go through that, you can kind of select your favorite ones, and it makes working through stuff a lot faster. Let's go ahead and remove that rating though, because I don't want to adjust that for now. If we see then this description, you can also edit here. You can also add tags or edit existing tags, or the color for that main sound. And then with that preset selected, I can exit out of this, and we can go ahead and play our sound. It's this really interesting lo-fi crunchy flute sound. Last thing that I want to cover on here is going to be the output volume. This could be a helpful control for just adjusting how much volume is being sent out of the synthesizer. So by default, usually it's up to 100%, which is going to be 10. But depending on the patch you're working on, maybe nice to turn it down so that way you're feeding less gain out of the synthesizer. Let's say you have a distortion after this or tape delay or something. You could adjust the amount of volumes that way you're not hitting that plugin super hard and oversaturating it. All right, so that is all for kind of the main presets and global controls on the synthesizer. From here, we'll go ahead and dive into each part of the synth, giving you a little bit more detailed information about how everything is set up. So thanks for checking out this video. I'll see you in the next one.